The hearing will come to order. Good morning, and I'd like to welcome everyone to today's hearing on the National Aeronautics and Space Administration. Our witness is NASA Administrator Charles Bolden. We appreciate your being here. We're going to have a vote about 2:25, and then we'll come right back. And then I think the next vote's at 4:30 or so, and I think hopefully we'll finish by then. As I mentioned in the subcommittee's first agency budget hearing yesterday, we are operating in an unusual environment this year due to the lateness of the President's budget request and the uncertainty about when the request will finally be submitted by OMB. As a result, we will spend less time today discussing NASA's specific budget proposals for next year and more time talking about general priorities and about issues that reflect on how NASA is managing the money that it has. Some of those issues, such as the regular occurrence of cost and schedule overruns on major NASA programs, are long-standing concerns. Others, like NASA's management strategy for assisting commercial partners in the development of new systems for crew transportation to the International Space Station, are relatively new. For a large and broad agency such as NASA, there is a nearly endless supply of these type of issues that we could focus on as part of the discussion about how to make NASA the most effective manager of its funds. One issue in particular I want to spend some time on today is the quality of enforcement within NASA's internal security regime. It is critically important for us to have confidence in NASA's ability to protect sensitive technologies and information from exploitation by entities that are looking to gain an advantage over the United States economically or militarily. The subcommittee has worked very hard over the past few years to protect our research and development programs from the full impact of recent budget reductions, but we cannot continue to do this if NASA cannot assure us that those investments will be adequately protected from entities and countries that have been designated as potential threats. One of the designated countries of greatest concern is China. We know that China is an active, aggressive espionage threat, and that according to a recent White House report, the technologies that NASA works on, aerospace and aeronautics technology, are those that the Chinese have most heavily targeted. I suspect that this focus on stealing space and flight-based technology explains at least some of the major advances that the Chinese space program has made over the past few years. Those advances challenge both our preeminent position in human spaceflight and international security, as China's space program is run exclusively by its military, the People's Liberation Army. For all these reasons, I'm particularly attuned to any allegation that a lapse in security has provided China or any other designated country access to sensitive information that is supposed to be protected under our export control laws and other relevant statutes. As you know, several allegations involving both the Ames and Langley Research Center have recently been brought to my office by NASA career civil servants. These are all career people who have had a long history, no one's of a political nature. These allegations raise concern about NASA's ability to control sensitive information at events or on the Internet, its ability to appropriately screen and supervise foreign nationals working at NASA's programs or with access to NASA's information, and its ability to respond to possible security violations in a timely and comprehensive manner. One of these allegations centered on access of Chinese national Bo Jiang to a sensitive technology at Langley, culminated this past weekend with Jiang's arrest at Dulles Airport, where he was attempting to return to China in possession of a large amount of information technology that he may not have been entitled to possess. So this is not a theoretical discussion. We're talking about real people and real allegations of substantive violations, some of which are currently being investigated by law enforcement authorities, which we will not get into. I would like to discuss the problems facing NASA's security enforcement regime, as well as some of the potential solutions I hope we can get you to improve upon security. And I asked Diana to call over there because this can be a hearing on NASA espionage, spying, and then we can, or it can be a hearing on the space program. And so, that's why I'm waiting to hear, your comments. I've yet to hear any formal reaction from NASA to those recommendations, and I hope that the silence is not an indication of disinterest or a lack of commitment. I I plan on staying with the issue, and I assume the whole committee will help me, but even if they don't, I will be there because I feel very, 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 very strongly about these issues. I believe that those specified reforms are necessary steps, and we have to do these things. So there's more that I could say about that, but we'll have some questions as we begin. But hopefully you can help us early on that. That means we'll spend less time. If not, we'll spend more time. But pursuant to the authority granted, I want to recognize Mr. Fattah first for an opening statement. Mr. Fattah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and to Administrator Bolden. It's an honor to have you before the committee again. And I want to say on the outset, I share the Chairman's concern that we do, and I know that as someone who's worn the uniform of the country and who's done just an extraordinary life of public service, that you too share any concern around dealing with protecting our national security and intellectual property. But I want to make some more general remarks. One is I had the honor to be at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Congressman Schiff's neck of the woods for the occasion of the Curiosity rover landing after 8.5 months travel, landing perfectly on the surface of Mars. I think that NASA's team in pulling off this extraordinary feat really puts and positions NASA well in terms of the President's goal of seeing a human flight to Mars in the not too distant future. And I know that the work that's being done to put together the most powerful engine ever and the other work that is critically important for this effort. But the Mars rover and its landing, I think, really suggested to the nation in a way that even late President John F. Kennedy would have been proud of. I think really that NASA was really at the very forefront. And I know you have dozens of missions, you have lots going on that sometimes it's hard to get the Congress and the country to focus on how successful NASA truly is. But I think this particular event really did galvanize the nation. So now I got a chance while I was in that area to also visit and to see the progress on the James Webb Telescope and a number of other activities, including SpaceX, which has become one of the two commercial carriers who successfully now, as was envisioned when the President and NASA made this decision to move aggressively in terms of commercial crew and commercial cargo. And so there's a lot that we can look and see in terms of your leadership and work. We appreciate your presence before the committee today. And I know there's some difficult times trying to imagine what your budget may be. And as you mentioned to us the last time you testified, you know, this is rocket science, and there are risks involved, there are challenges, but you have helped navigate this agency at a very difficult time in terms of mission and in terms of some of the challenges in terms of fiscal uncertainty. So welcome again, and look forward to your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Fattah. Pursuant to the authority granted in Section 191 of Title II of the United States Code and Clause 2M2 of House Rule 11, today's witnesses will be sworn in before testifying. Please rise and raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? I do. Thank you. Let the record reflect that the witness answered in the affirmative. Administrator Bolden, your written statement will be made part of the record. You may proceed and summarize as you see appropriate.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman and members of the subcommittee, I welcome this opportunity to discuss NASA's continued progress in implementing the bipartisan program for NASA agreed to by the President and the Congress, which will ensure the United States continues to lead the world in space exploration, technology, innovation, and scientific discovery. NASA is developing spaceflight capabilities to send humans to an asteroid in 2025 and on to Mars in the 2030s. We're building the world's most powerful rocket, the Space Launch System, and the Orion crew vehicle for deep space exploration. In 2014, a little more than a year from now, we'll fly the first test flight on Orion, its first uncrewed test with an uncrewed flight of Orion and the SLS together planned for 2017. The first crewed mission of the two vehicles is scheduled for 2021. The knowledge we're gaining from the American astronauts living and conducting research on the International Space Station is critical to our future in deep space. In the coming year, we will prepare a year-long stay by a U.S. astronaut to explore human adaptation to space. We've begun commercial resupply of the station from American soil. SpaceX conducted its first resupply mission to the ISS in 2012 and is currently berthed to the ISS on its second resupply mission. Orbital Sciences Corporation is preparing for the maiden flight of its Antares rocket and plans its first mission to the station later this year. NASA is on track to send our astronauts to space from American shores using American companies by 2017. In critical support of the broader mission, we're developing and testing future technologies that will enable us to move and operate faster and more efficiently in space, land more mass accurately on another planet, and enable new destinations. Our ambitious aeronautics research agenda will reduce fuel consumption, emissions, and noise to make the next generation air transportation system a reality. With 60 missions observing the Earth, the Sun, the planets, and the universe, NASA remains the world's premier space science organization and the critical source of information on the home planet. Building on the brilliant success of our Curiosity rover on Mars, NASA plans a robust multi-year Mars program, including a new robotic science rover based on the Curiosity design, set to launch in 2020. NASA is on track for the 2018 launch of the James Webb Space Telescope, the most powerful telescope in history. In closing, Mr. Chairman, I want to address an issue of particular concern to you and me. That's securing sensitive export-controlled information at our NASA facilities. As you know, earlier this month, NASA completed a review of a potential security breach at our Langley Research Facility involving a Chinese national who worked for a contractor there. We referred this matter to appropriate law enforcement officials, and the person in question no longer works at Langley. We continue to fully cooperate with law enforcement officials investigating this current matter and stand ready to assist in any way we can. I also want to report on several additional steps that I've taken to address concerns you've raised and which I share. First, I've ordered a complete review of the access which foreign nationals from designated countries are granted at NASA facilities, as well as our security procedures with regard to these individuals more broadly. This is in addition to reviews being conducted by the NASA IG and others. My intention is to assess the need for an independent review, which you call for in your press conference, and once these steps of review, internal review, are complete. Second, I've closed down the NASA Technical Reports database while we review whether there's a risk of export-controlled documents being made available on this website. Third, I've ordered a moratorium on granting any new access to NASA facilities to individuals from specific designated countries, specifically China, Burma, Eritrea, Iran, North Korea, Saudi Arabia, Sudan, and Uzbekistan. Fourth, while this review is ongoing, I've also ordered that any remote computer access to NASA resources be terminated for those from the same specific designated countries. Fifth, NASA has also been working very closely with law enforcement agencies on security and counterintelligence issues and will continue to do so. Sixth, the review I have directed is also being accompanied by a renewed emphasis to our supervisors and the workforce on the importance of our security protocols, including assessments of new training that may be needed. And I would say, Mr. Chairman, just before coming over here, I had the privilege of doing a video teleconference with all of our export control officers at each of the NASA centers who are having a meeting at the Stennis Space Center this week, and we re-emphasize the issues that are of concern to you and me. Finally, I want this committee to know that I've placed a priority on protecting security, export control, and safety compliance funding from any budgetary impacts from sequestration, and my team will continue working under that guidance. NASA takes all your allegations of security violations and those from anyone very seriously and follows a long-established procedure to investigate them quickly and thoroughly. These investigations are handled by our security and counterintelligence professionals in cooperation with the NASA Inspector General and other appropriate law enforcement officials. The agency is focused and committed to preventing and prosecuting all security violations. Mr. Chairman, I just want to add, this is about national security, not about NASA security. And I take that personally. I'm responsible, and I will hold myself accountable once our reviews are completed. With that, I thank you and look forward to your questions.
Well, thank you, Mr. Administrator. I appreciate that, and I want the record to show that there was a whole series, and I will still ask a handful, but not to the degree that we were going to raise. But I do appreciate it. I think that's very important. And I know, and let me just reiterate what Mr. Fatal said of your record, in service to our country in the military, and also your son's service to our country in the military, in addition to your time in the space program. So I know that you're concerned to share these, and so I appreciate you acting quickly. There is one, and I'll just read a portion of the statement. I'll just end on the one, but in light of the arrest of NASA's contractor Bojang over the weekend, I had asked yesterday, and Mr. Fatal was here, the FBI Director Mueller, in our hearing, whether NASA's centers are significant targets of foreign espionage. Director Mueller responded, and I quote, "Certainly they're targets, yes, and it is a significant threat. We recognize that it has a significant threat," end of quote. He went on to say, and I quote again, quote, "If anything, I would say that the threat is more substantial than perhaps was 10 to 15 years ago," end of quote. Again, the FBI director believes that foreign espionage is a significant threat to NASA centers and is, quote, more substantial than it was a decade ago. So I think both NASA and the Congress will have to work together to heed his words carefully. There were a number of questions that I was going to ask you, which I will just submit now, many of them for the record. The one, though, that I think you did not cover, but you indirectly did, and is still outstanding. The one question that we had raised was that will you appoint an independent outside panel led by someone like former Attorney General Dick Thornburg, who used to be the Attorney General, but if there's someone else of that caliber, that would be appropriate, or someone his stature to comprehensively review and audit security protocols and enforcement, including foreign national access and export controls at every NASA center and headquarters. And will this panel have unrestricted access to center personnel and records and report back to the administrator and Congress within 6 months on its findings and recommendation? And if you can answer that, but I wanted to just clarify, Director Mueller used this same approach for the FBI. When the 9/11 took place and Director Mueller was appointed, there was a transition over, and he embraced. We had the National Academy of Public Administration. We had a former Attorney General Dick Thornburg do it. It was very, very successful. Other appropriation committees have used NAPA. So the question is, would you comment on this outside panel? You sort of directly said it, but
I did, Mr. Chairman. And in my first, when I read the actions that we were taking, and the first one that I said was I'd ordered a complete review. That review is being done by the Associate Administrator Robert Lightfoot. I gave him specific written directions as to what I want done. I've talked with the head of my Office of Protective Services, Mr. Joe Mahali, and Joe has actually said he feels that it may be that an outside review of the type that you mentioned would in fact be very helpful. So since he is doing an internal review of the Office of Protective Services, our security and export control, Robert is doing an internal review of all the centers. We've requested data. We just want to make sure that we get all that in and know what the depth of our problem is. As I told the export control officials this morning, they should probably expect that within a week or so, I probably will direct that we go out and ask NAPA, specifically NAPA, since that was who you suggested, to do an external review. But I didn't make that commitment.
No, I think that's very fair.
But that is my intent, my probable intent.
No, I think that's very, very fair, and it's appropriate. We have a vote on, and then we'll leave with 5 minutes left. But just to kind of narrow down a couple of things, for more than 2 fiscal years, NASA has had a statutory restriction placed on its cooperative activities with China. When the subcommittee wrote the restrictions, we intended to prevent all access by official Chinese visitors to NASA facilities unless advance notification and certification are provided. Are you interpreting these restrictions in this way?
Mr. Chairman, as we discussed in your office, I still believe that our staffs have a philosophical, not a philosophical, a difference in legal interpretation on the law as it's written, and we interpret it to be a restriction with relation to bilateral activities with China. What I have pledged to do is that since I don't interpret it to include multilateral operations such as the International Space University, when we made a call to the staff.
I agree.
Yes, sir. But that's what I think we agree, but I just want to make sure, and what I have said I will do from here on out is, as a courtesy, even if it's multilateral, we'll let you know that, you know, we have something that's coming, but we don't anticipate having a Chinese visitor to a NASA center here anytime soon.
Good. In a letter dated June 20th, you had answered a question. You said, as described more fully in the cover letter, there were 156 Chinese nationals working at NASA facilities. I've heard the figure now up to 200. Can you comment on how many there are, and also how many Americans are working in PLA facilities in China?
Yes, sir. Mr. Chairman, we have now done a thorough, we hope, search, and we have 281 foreign nationals from designated countries who are working, who have physical access to NASA facilities, and of those, 192 are foreign nationals from China. So the number is 192 foreign nationals. Now that number includes people with green cards and with visas. So you know that, but we still, that 192 are the ones who have been impacted by the actions that I just said I took with reference to access to different things that NASA does.
Because in June of 2012, it was only 156, so the trend is really going up rather than down. Now, how many Americans work in Chinese facilities, PLA facilities?
Mr. Chairman, I will get back to you for the record, but we have checked, and to my knowledge, we have no NASA personnel or personnel who are under NASA contract, NASA grants, or anything else who are working in the, you know, in the People's Republic of China. There are probably many Americans who are working in the People's Republic of China.
Right, but I meant in the People's Liberation Army, the space facilities.
We have none from NASA who are working there. The issue that we still owe you is, do we have anyone who is working on a NASA grant or who may be affiliated with an agency or an organization that's working on a NASA grant, but their work also takes them to a PLA facility? That is what I have to get back to you for the record. There, you know, as an example, there may be an engineer who is working on a NASA grant, but his real job requires him working for Boeing or someone else to be at a PLA activity, not doing anything related to NASA, but doing their primary work. And I don't have that information right now. Okay. But we are trying to get that.
Okay. Are you aware of any instances in which NASA has encouraged an external entity, as they did down at NASA Langley, to undertake with its own funds a cooperative activity with China that would be prohibited from using NASA funding? And are you going to be clarifying that with the contractors? Because there was almost a workaround to get around the subcommittee language. Will that be part of what you're looking at?
Mr. Chairman, because you complimented Lisa Rowe, the director of Langley, the other day in the hearing, I want to make sure I respectfully disagree with the implication of what you just said. I don't know whether you meant to say it or not, but Lisa and her people are not attempting to use contractors as a workaround to the rules. We would not do that. And as a matter of fact, we really feel that we have been fully complying with the law, that our processes are strong. What I have determined is that, as any organization of our size, we may have some gaps in compliance with those processes, and I think that's what probably happened down at Langley. But we were not attempting to work around the law or the system or anything. And Lisa Rowe is one of the best center directors I have, as you know, and she would not attempt to use a contractor to work around the law.
Okay. Well, NIA did, and I'm not going to go into the specific of his office and things like that because of the investigations, but we saw the thing where the one, and I could pull it up, where the one person in NASA says, you know, there are times that we should follow the regulations, but then there are times that we should ignore the regulations.
And Congressman, that's what I'm saying. That is an allegation that I have been unable to substantiate, and it's so, you know, that is, we're the best place to work in government, and I don't say that lightly. And we're the best place to work in government based on an employee viewpoint survey. And I went back and looked at that survey to find out if there were people who had indicated in the survey that they were afraid to come forward with violations of the law or export control violations. And we rank among the top in the government as people who say they trust their leadership. They have no qualms about coming forward with a violation of any kind. And so what our employees have told us in the employee viewpoint survey that made us #1 in government is incongruous with what the person or persons told you when they came in and brought you the report from Langley.
Well, we had people from Ames and we had people
Yes,
from
sir,
Langley,
I understand.
and we had a total of 5.
Yes, sir.
All career people, and you can think about this for a moment, but if you like, we could contact, they are all concerned about their jobs.
Yes, sir.
But we could, and I would trust you implicitly that if you would want, and you can let me know, I would contact them and set up a meeting where just you came, no one else, to meet with them. But they were very, very concerned, and also they had lost confidence, and I'm going to end this because I told you that we're not going to keep driving this.
Yes, sir.
But they were not really very pleased with the IG. And I, frankly, have not been pleased with the IG. I have not been pleased with the IG at the local level, nor have I been pleased with the IG at the NASA level. So they were intimidated, they were fearful, and but I will give you the quotes, and I can show you where the man's office was, and I can show you where the F-20. I mean, we can go through some of those things. But if you want, you let me know. And with
that's really not necessary. As I told you when we met before, no one was more bothered and concerned about these allegations than I. And as I said in my opening statement, I hold myself personally responsible. So I have tried to assure every single member of the 18,000 members of the NASA family that if they have a problem, they can come into my office. I reemphasize that frequently. And I am bothered at the effectiveness of my leadership if I have 5 people who say they don't trust me to come forward and tell me that they think there's an export violation. That's not about, I don't need to know who they are. I am bothered that even 5 out of 18,000 bothers me as a leader that they don't trust me and they don't trust their center director to come forward and say, we know of an export violation. Okay. And that's what they're saying.
Okay. Well, I was we're down to 5 minutes.
Yes, sir.
If I were an employee, I would trust you to come in. I may not trust some other
people. That's my point, sir. You don't even.
But I may not trust some other people, but I would know that if I came in, and so you think about it, we're going to end because we're down to 5 minutes on this. If you do, you give me a call and I'll ask them to come on in. And secondly, I think I have kind of I appreciate your willingness to do all these things. If you could contact the committee when you make the decision with regard to NASA.
Yes, sir. We will do that.
Appreciate it. With regard to that, we'll be in recess until I think there are 2 votes.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Fatah, before Mr. Fatah, Mr. Adderholt is part of the delegation meeting that went to Rome for the installation of Pope. He wanted to. Would you agree to meet with him and talk with him?
Yes,
okay,
sir.
good.
I'd be glad to.
Mr. Fatah.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and let me thank the administrator. And before I go forward, I do want to just put into the record a little bit more about your military service. You flew over 100 combat missions, and you served as the Deputy Commanding General for the 1st Marine Expeditionary Force in the Pacific, and you also in Kuwait during Operation Desert Storm. Is that
Desert
correct?
Thunder.
Desert Thunder.
Between
right.
the big ones.
I want the record to reflect your tremendous
I don't want to take
service
credit for something I didn't do.
to our country. And now let's move to the work that you are engaged in now.
Yes, sir.
For more than a decade, for every single day, we've had human beings on the space station doing important scientific work. NASA has been engaged in a transition that has been very successful to create the space station now, after building it and constructing it, into our newest federal laboratory, national laboratory. And the engagement between NASA and K6 has worked out well. And I met with the board here when they were in Washington, and was very energized about the great research effort that is going on. So if you wanted to just spend a minute and talk about how that has proceeded.
I sure would. I would love to, sir. Thanks very much for the opportunity. CASIS is a private entity. NASA wanted to get out of the business of having to be responsible for recruiting and managing experiments and researchers in the U.S. segment of the International Space Station for a number of reasons. When I used to be in NASA, people used to always complain that NASA was guilty of doing junk science. I never believed that, but one of the things that we felt we could do is if we handed it off to another independent organization outside of NASA, it would bring credibility to the work that was being done on station. And the members of the board, they are pretty influential people and pretty prominent and well known in the science and technology community. So CASIS was stood up. It is a part of Space Florida. Again, Space Florida has been an incredible entity. It is the business development arm, if you will, for space for the state of Florida. And we've learned how to work very well with them. As a result of CASIS, we are having more and more non-NASA people that don't even have anything to do with NASA who are now wanting to fly on the International Space Station. We're about to put up some Earth science instruments on station. That was not done before. I was led to believe that station was not a good platform for Earth science. That's not true. We're about to put up a solar science mission. Station was not good for solar science. That's not true. So as a result of having an outside entity that helps us evaluate people that want to fly, we're able to put additional assets to enhance the utilization. What we hope that it will prove, it will be a model for the other partners, because the U.S. segment's only one part of it. All of our other partners, the Russians, the Japanese, the Europeans, they all are evaluating how CASIS works for us and thinking about a way that they could do a similar thing, because everybody's faced with ways to cut down on the operating costs, the daily cost of running the International Space Station. And so it's proving to help us.
Well, I'm been quite impressed with the work that's being done there, and I know it could not have happened without NASA's full partnership in it. Now, we just had the head of the National Science Foundation in yesterday, and in part he was talking about the great work that they're doing, but he mentioned in the agency's involvement in the stand-up of this new observatory in Chile. Yes. And of course, we have other observatories like in Hawaii and the like, and we have the Hubble. And now, as the Webb telescope starts to come into view, can you help the committee understand how all of this interacts one to another and gives us a better sense of?
Sir, the big thing is collaboration across agencies, and the new observatory in Chile is one that we will utilize I had a hearing yesterday with the Science Committee on asteroids and NEOs, near Earth objects. The observatory in Chile will give us another instrument that we can use for identification and tracking. We have a number of different places around the world. A number of them are National Science Foundation sponsored, if not funded, facilities. So we take advantage of the collaboration with the National Science Foundation to get information that helps us determine identification and characterization of asteroids, if you will, as one example. We fly out of Point Arenas, Chile, every year. We go down into the Antarctic. We actually do some work that's in collaboration with the National Science Foundation. Again, it's our earth science efforts from airborne earth science. When we go north, it's called Ice Bridge. I think we call it the same thing in the south, but I don't want to say that because the ice guys will tell me I don't know what I'm talking about. But we fly toward both poles to do ice research, and a lot of that is done in collaboration with the National Science Foundation also.
And the last point I'll make in this round is I had an occasion to go speak at a conference on severe weather events. You know, obviously we've had the most, in terms of aggregate number, one after another, the most severe weather we've ever seen. But it was fascinating because a number of the experts at NOAA, which is also under our committee's jurisdiction, who operate the National Hurricane Center, actually some of them were educated through NASA's education program. And I had a chance to meet with your education team and the hundreds and hundreds of scholarships and fellowships and that NASA has provided, you know, have an impact far beyond, you know, so for instance, when we had Hurricane Sandy, I mean, the fact that they were able to pinpoint exactly the location that it was going to hit actually saved lives, saved, you know, so it's, you know, NASA's benefit is far beyond its space exploration, and it helps right here on Earth in so many different ways. So I want to thank you, and if you could talk a little bit about the education work, because I know you've made this an important part of your leadership. That'll be my last question for this round.
Yes, sir. I try to be a good follower, and when I interviewed with the president, one of the things he told me that he really wanted to be done was he wants to increase the number of engineers in STEM fields that come out of this country, since the days when we would bring people in from other countries, educate them, train them, and they would choose to stay here and become citizens, it doesn't happen that much anymore. They tend to go back home now for a variety of reasons. But so we've now got to train our own because we don't compete right now with other nations in terms of producing engineers. You know, many times it's because we just don't have the numbers of people. I'm not excited when people, they like to cite the number of how many more engineers China creates than we do. Well, how many more people do they have? So, you know, if you say a percentage of the population, we're probably as good as they are, but we're not good enough. And so NASA really focuses on STEM education, and it's STEM education K through 12. This committee and the Appropriations Committee from the Senate have been very good through the years to make sure that we have adequate funding for a number of programs, the NASA Space Grant Program, MUREP, and others that allow us to focus our efforts into underserved communities where we can try to enhance the numbers of people, young people who get interested in STEM curricula. So that it's a passion for me. As you know, it's a passion for Leland Melvin, who's the Associate Administrator for Education. And we're trying to help Secretary Duncan and help him have the best education department in the world.
All right. Well, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General Bolden, thank you for your service to the country and all that you do at NASA. You know how strongly we all support you and how passionate this subcommittee is, and the Congress has been really arm in arm in working together to support NASA and do everything we can to keep America's space program the best in the world. And looking forward to the day in the near future when anytime the NASA administrator appears, the room's packed. You've got as much excitement out there in the country as there was when when I was a kid growing up in Houston, I remember vividly the Apollo program and the tremendous excitement that the whole country felt. Those days are coming again, but I think it's not for lack of effort on your part or the part of the Congress. I personally think NASA is spread too thin. There's too much interference politically with what you do. And how do you plan any big, complicated, expensive rocket or spacecraft with the pillar to post, year to year budgeting, appropriation cycle you got to deal with? So Chairman Wolf and I are working, as you know, on legislation that we'd look forward to your help and support on to try to give NASA more stability and predictability, let you buy rockets and spacecraft the same way the Navy buys aircraft carriers and submarines with multi-year procurement, to give you you and your successor, as I think Chairman Wolf has told you, we'd be delighted to see even you be, if once our bill passes, you be the first new director of NASA, would be just fine, but give you more stability like the FBI director, overlapping administrations. We'll look forward to working with you on that. And in terms of looking to the future and what lies ahead for NASA and the manned program and the planetary program, could you talk to the committee a little bit about the effect of the Senate looks like they're going to act today or maybe later today and pass the 5 appropriations bills with a CR for the others that will include the CJS bill, which is contains language that Chairman Wolf and Senator Mikulski have worked out that's got strong support both in the House and the Senate. Talk to us about that appropriations bill for 2013 that you're going to see for the remainder of the year and what that means for a heavy lift rocket, which I did not see in your opening statement, and also for the planetary program.
Sure. Sir, as the NASA administrator, I'm always happy to get whatever the Congress chooses to appropriate. However, I must say that we still, though the mark is what I would consider to be close to what we asked for, it has some shortcomings that will cause us problems down the road. And those shortcomings are exacerbated by the fact that sequestration was allowed to take effect. And so on top of any reductions, there's another, as you know, there's another 5% across the board reduction. 2 areas that have me significantly concerned right now are commercial crew, again, and it's because I tell people all the time, we have an interdependence in our exploration program right now. And so those who remember back in 1972 when the original space transportation system was proposed, it was a 3-pronged program that had routine access to space, an orbiting space station, and what was called an orbital maneuvering vehicle that was going to allow us to go back to the moon, go from space station to space station, and then allow us to go to planets, to distant planets. That was a long time ago. That was long before I came to NASA. But that was the vision. We didn't do right back then. We decided that we could only afford one. And when you take a triangle and you take a leg away, the triangle falls. And that's exactly what happened to any hope of exploration beyond low Earth orbit for NASA for the period of time between 1970, when the space transportation system was originally approved, and when we phased out the shuttle in July of 2011. We have an opportunity now again to put the triangle back together. And if you don't have all 3 legs, if you don't have heavy lift launch vehicle and multi-purpose crew vehicle, the International Space Station, which is that's our toehold on the universe today, and commercial crew and cargo to get us in and out of low Earth orbit, then you take away a leg, and the triangle won't work. So
yes, but the heavy lift rocket, talk to us about that and the planetary
the heavy
program.
lift rocket is essential, as I mentioned, and we have support for it. You know what? If I were king for a day, I would, and I think I've talked to the chairman about this a little bit. Flexibility within the top line would be absolutely superb for us. We are in the development program business. The heavy lift rocket, the multi-purpose crew vehicle, you know, we have a flatline budget, and I can live with that if we're allowed flexibility inside that flatline budget. And what that means, we can't have winners and losers. I need to be able to move money in the exploration program when I need a chunk of money for the heavy lift rocket or construction of a test facility or something. I need to be able to move it there to keep everything going sequentially, so that we don't have to stop a manufacturer or an industrial partner, and we don't have that flexibility right now.
Right, but I know
but the top line is good.
And that's in this environment a blessing. NASA, that's an indication of the support of the Congress, the chairman, and Chairman Mikulski for NASA, because everybody else is really getting cut. And we admire you, support the agency, and so that's a good thing. And
yes, sir. I told the chairman I will talk to Congressman Adderholt. Every Congressman Adderholt, he's gonna want me to agree that we should put even more money into the heavy lift launch vehicle, and I would not agree with that. I'm a person who tries to be honest. I don't need a lot of extra money in the heavy lift launch vehicle right now. I do need additional money to shore up commercial crew. Otherwise, that leg of the triangle is going to fall away, and we're going to be back to 1970s again, where we had this grand vision of exploration and going to an asteroid and going to Mars, and we can't get there because we can't complete the technology development and the understanding of what happens to the human body, the lessons we're learning on the International Space Station right now, because I can't get people to the International Space Station, because I do not want to pay the Russians beyond 2016.
Sure, but of course
that's what I will have to do.
Of course, the law, the money, the funding you see from Congress is an indication of our support for a heavy lift rocket to get beyond low Earth orbit.
Yes, sir.
Could you also talk to us? I know my friend Mr. Schiff will follow up on this as well about the effect. First of all, if you could very quickly, a time frame on the heavy lift rocket and Orion, and then secondly, the effect of the work the chairman's done with Chairman Mikulski on funding the planetary program and how important that is both for Mars and for Europa.
Yeah. If you very quickly, the Orion will fly its first flight a little bit more than a year from now, and I know that's hard for people to believe, but we have the first test flight on Orion without an environmental control system, and you want to call it a prototype. It's sort of like a prototype, very heavily instrumented. It will launch in the fall of 2014. It will buy down a lot of risk on the ultimate vehicle, because it will tell us whether or not that vehicle is appropriate to withstand the intense pressures and temperatures of reentry from places like lunar orbit or Mars or an asteroid. So we need that. It will also help us understand whether it's oversized, undersized, or what, because what you see in Orion today is not the final Orion that we'll have. The heavy lift launch vehicle should be available in 2017, and then we'll put Orion with the heavy lift launch vehicle, fly its first unmanned, uncrewed flight in 2017, and then should be ready to come back and fly the first manned mission in 2021. Our science program, I don't like using the word robust, because robust means you got a lot of money. Our science program is aggressive and ambitious and highly successful. I told people yesterday, it's interesting because we were being blasted for how much money had been taken from the planetary program and how we had decimated the Mars program. And yet today we have the most sophisticated rover in the history of humanity on the surface of Mars, getting ready to climb a mountain and help us understand the geologic history of that planet, which relates to Earth, and it help us understand more about our own planet.
Sure.
Between now and the 2030s, when we take humans, we have InSight, which is a smaller lander that will actually core meters into the Martian surface. That's scheduled for 2016. We follow it up by, in fact, MAVEN, which is an atmospheric studies mission, is next year. Then InSight in 2016. We are a partner again with the Europeans on their ExoMars program, not to the extent that we wanted to be, because we couldn't afford it, and we got criticized when we said we got to step back for a moment and find out what we can afford. The chairman said, I can't do everything. I agree. And so we told the Europeans, we can't provide a launch vehicle. We can't provide this. But we're giving them an orbiting communications vehicle for 2016 and actually contributing to the lander with our expertise, which keeps work going at the Jet Propulsion Labs, because that's entry, descent, and landing.
Sure.
So that gives us an opportunity to keep that going. And then in 2020, we have a Curiosity-like rover that we're going to put on the surface of Mars again, use the same design to save money. The science definition team has already begun their work and will probably come in with a report to us late summer, early fall, and we'll know what we're going to do there.
But if I could, in conclusion, very quickly, if you could also comment on the fact, obviously the committee has protected funding for planetary. That's thanks to Chairman Wolf and Chairman Mikulski. but also because the language. Also, if I could ask you to reiterate your commitment to ensuring that NASA will carry out the decadal survey's plan for a mission to Europa.
Congressman Culberson, you always put me in this position. I am trying to carry out the decadal survey, the NRC's decadal survey direction that their number one priority is Mars and a sample return. That's number one. And what we're trying to do is make sure that the 2020 lander, that the science definition teams make sure that if we don't bring a sample back then because we aren't able to reach an agreement with the Congress and the administration on funding that we will not preclude that lander from being able to be the beginning of a sample return mission. If I can't do that, the science committee of my own advisory committee and the National Research Council is going to say, forget it. If you're not going to do sample return, then forget about Mars and let's go to Europa. So we think that we are complying with the direction of the decadal survey right now in really focusing on their number one priority, which was Mars sample return, and then Europa is the
You've
second.
got the support from the Congress to continue on both those tracks because we don't know yet about
We can't do both.
the funding. We don't know about the funding level yet
because
for
of the
Mars
funding
sample
we
return.
have, we'll continue the work on a Europa mission as we have briefed you. We're looking for innovative ways to fly a mission to Europa that is affordable. All estimates that I have been given on a mission to Europa right now are not affordable in our budget or in the foreseeable budget, not if we're flying to Mars. So, we cannot do both, and so, but we continue our developmental efforts at a lower level, not a full development program yet, but
that's why the Congress has got language in the bill to make sure that we
are doing
that.
Yes,
ability to do that mission.
We continue to do that.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I just want to join my colleague at the outset in thanking you, Mr. Chairman, and also Ranking Member Fattah for your strong support of planetary science and the Mars program and Europa, which are in a far better position now than they started out a year and a half ago and would be nowhere without your good work. And Mr. Administrator, it's good to see you. I do want to set the record straight on one thing. That we have been very critical of the administration on Mars, not because we don't acknowledge the incredible success of Curiosity, but rather because Curiosity, the development of Curiosity occurred in prior years. And while we're funding the current operation of Curiosity, none of us are content that Curiosity be our last great achievement. So it was very important to us to continue in the tradition of Curiosity with other great planetary science missions. And I'm very grateful that NASA has moved forward with another Curiosity-like mission and as part of sample return. And I share my colleague, Mr. Culberson's deep interest and commitment to Europa, which I think we also think is a fabulous mission and of great scientific interest, and something I think we're all committed to. And we need to work on the resources, we need to work on the sequencing and the timing, and we need to work on bringing costs down. But I think we all have a deep interest in both those missions. I wanted to ask you about the Mars budget. I understand it's very important to launch in 2020, given the technical challenges and uncertainties surrounding planetary orbits with launching at a later date. Can you tell us how NASA plans to ensure that adequate resources are devoted to pre-formulation of the Mars 2020 mission to minimize risk and to enable a successful launch on schedule? My main concern with respect to the 2020 mission is that I'm concerned that if NASA backloads the funding too much, we'll lose critical expertise that we've gained from developing and launching Curiosity. So if you could address that.
Congressman, as we briefed, as we mentioned before in conversation with people, when we brought the 2020 proposal forward, we showed where we could fund 2020 in the 2013 budget and the projection forward for the out years. It will be tough due to sequestration. So that word keeps coming up because that changes everything that we told you. As long as we can manage our funds the way that we are doing currently, then March 2020 will be okay. If we have to live under sequestration for the next 10 years as it is set out, it's a whole new ball game because NASA is no longer a $17.7 billion agency. NASA is a $16.8 billion agency, and I don't do magic. I will have to find a way to delete $1 billion worth of either $1 billion worth of content or $1 billion worth of people, and I don't think we want to do the people. So I will have to eliminate $1 billion worth of content, or as I mentioned to Mr. Culberson, become very innovative in finding new ways, different ways that we can do the projects. What was so great about Mars 2020 is it's a carbon copy of Curiosity, and that's why I'm relatively confident when I tell you that I think we can. We should not have problems with Mars 2020. We've got pieces and parts. We've got all the expertise. The only thing we have to do with Mars 2020 is put the results from the science definition team together and then determine whether or not we can do all the science that they want to do. But the mission itself, minus whatever the final science turns out to be. And as I mentioned before, if it turns out that we can't figure out how to get a Mars sample return, at least the precursor for it on the mission, we're liable to be abandoned by the science community. So that's a challenge.
Well, it's certainly my hope that we don't live in a sequestered environment for too long, and that we could come together on an agreement that
yes, sir,
makes a more sensible approach to our deficit and debt problem. Well, and we'll continue to work with you on making sure that whether we have a sequester or don't, that we don't so backload the Mars funding that we lose our talent pool at places like JPL.
Yes, sir.
I want to follow up, too, on my colleague's interest in Europa. And the Senate budget has money for Europa in it. And if you could share with us a little of your thoughts on the early priorities in Europa. Is it in doing some of the scientific analyses to determine how this can be done in a more cost-effective way? Is that where you would make an early investment in Europa? Or where would you employ those early resources on Europa?
Congressman, I will get back to you. I'll take it for the record to get you the details of what's being done right now. But as I understand it, we are taking whatever funds we have for Europa, not for science definition, but for the definition of the mission itself. What type of vehicle can we afford that will enable us to get the scientists to the planet, to the moon, such that we get good science from it? Doing analysis that helps us understand how we get more than a month of life out of the vehicle. Europa is an incredibly hostile environment from a radiation standpoint. We can't go and orbit Europa the way that we would do our own moon or the way that we do Vesta or other things. The vehicle will last a month, if that long. It's just the radiation environment is too harsh. So we've got to be innovative in finding ways to, some of the concepts involve, actually flying around Jupiter, and you don't get as much data as you would normally, but at least you keep the science, the satellite alive, because it minimizes the exposure to the just devastating radiation environment of Europa. That's what I'm told. Now I have already gotten myself in trouble, and I've got science people all over the world who are now saying, who told the NASA administrator that? But that's what I've been told. So
I'm sure you'll be hearing from them, and we will as well.
Yes, sir.
One last question, Mr. Administrator. The Flight Opportunities Program is a small program in the Space Technology Mission Directorate that purchases reusable suborbital flights for technology development on commercial vehicles on a fixed-price basis. It's a program that costs very little comparatively, but has an outsized impact leveraging private investment in a rapidly growing high-tech industry. NASA doesn't pay to develop the vehicles, which are built private funds to meet a market, but NASA serves as a key anchor customer. Funding for the Space Technology Mission Directorate did not meet the President's request last year and may not this year as well. How will those reductions impact the Flight Opportunities Program?
Mr. Chairman, Congressman Schiff, I'll get back to you on the exact implications for the Flight Opportunities Program, but as I understand it,
And I don't mind you calling me that, but I think Mr. Wolf might.
I will get back to you, but as I remember, the programs that we have already notified, that the Space Technology Mission Directorate has already notified centers and partners that we won't be able to start. I don't remember Flight Opportunities being one of them. We do have already working with, for example, Virgin Galactic and some other companies that we're going to try to utilize the capability that they give us. But I will get back to you with the details on any impacts to the Flight Opportunity Program.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Bonner?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Administrator, good afternoon. It is unfortunate, and we certainly don't blame you for this, but it is unfortunate that as we've had this discussion, a good discussion, that we're doing so in the absence of a budget submission, because it's hard to talk dollars when we don't even know what the administration is going to be bringing to Congress. We're actually debating the budget over on the House floor today, and so there will be several different proposals offered, and hopefully we will come up with a budget in the House. The Senate is committed to doing the same. I have a question that's consistent with my prior visits with you about NASA's future. But before I go there, I know you had indicated to the chairman and also in a response to Mr. Culberson that you would be talking directly with Mr. Adderholt, but in the since he is not here today, and he's my colleague from Alabama, he asked me to put a few records on the record. You've already talked about some of this, but I want to get his questions on the record for your consideration. Many of us believe that the Space Launch System adds an important national capability to our space program as a vehicle able to launch both astronauts and deep space science missions. And it is our understanding that the SLS has met several early milestones, but some of us are concerned that OMB has apparently imposed a multi-year budget of $1.1 billion per year for the rocket development portion of the work. Every rocket development engineering plan has peaks and valleys, so some might say that this flatline budget is artificial. What do you anticipate your budget doing in both 14 and 15 to ensure that SLS receives the modest increases in those 2 years which are necessary in order to continue to stay on schedule and to serve the country's space needs in a timely way? And then I'll have a follow-up to that question.
Yes, sir. Congressman Bonner, when we reached an agreement, we, the administration with the Congress in 2010 in the Authorization Act, with the insistence actually of Senator K. Bailey Hutchinson, that NASA needed to establish what its priorities were. At that time, among those priorities were SLS and MPCV, enhancement and expansion of the International Space Station by utilization of a commercial crew and cargo capability, the James Webb Space Telescope. So those were the big three, and we have committed that when we have to take money, we will not go to the big three. And that's, if you look at the budget submission for 2013, even when we've gone through 5% cut exercises and everything else, we've blocked those off. I recently added safety and security and export control to that we won't in effect across the board cuts to those areas just like we do everything else. Again, I hate to keep going back to it, but the one thing that could impact SLS and MPC sequestration, but again, looking at 1 year. The vehicle itself will probably be ready before its 2014 launch date, but it's getting time on the range, getting a launch vehicle made available because we're going to launch it on a Delta IV. So that is a great indication, especially when you consider that MPCV has recovered from a crack during testing, but those kinds of things we expected. That's the peak and valley that you talked about in funding. In a development program, things can be blowing along just as smoothly as you want, and then all of a sudden something unexpected happens. Unless something unexpected happens, we don't see that we won't make the 2017 launch date for the first flight of MPCV on SLS, and then a 2021. I would love to be able to pull the 2021 date forward, but I need to talk with people who are much smarter than I am in the agency to find out whether that is a technical challenge or whether it's a fiscal challenge. The 2017 date is not a technical challenge at all. It's a fiscal challenge. I'm sorry, it's not a fiscal challenge. It's a technical challenge. We just cannot have the vehicle ready before 2017. 2021, I don't know.
Well, you made a compelling argument. I don't think you'd have anyone at this table disagree with you about the impact of sequestration. I hope you've had a chance to convey that message to the President, because as you know, when we studied history, or civics, and how a bill becomes a law, it passes the House, it passes the Senate, we reconcile the two, and it takes the President to enact it. And so sequestration, we all have our hands on that, whether we voted for it or not. And the President, the administration has a responsibility as well. But I don't know any person up here, Democrat or Republican, that is celebrating sequestration, and especially if it goes in terms of its longer term. The follow-up question for Congressman Adderholt would be that, based on your response there, it's our understanding that our current biggest rockets would take approximately 7 years, for example, to reach the moons around Jupiter and or Saturn. The SLS rocket could carry a larger payload than the recent Mars lander missions and could reach Jupiter or Saturn in roughly 3.5 years. Now, I think you've already addressed this with Mr. Culberson, but just to make sure it's all on the record, that would seem to some that it would be a good return on the investment. What is NASA doing to encourage coordination and planning between SLS and the planetary science projects?
Mr. Bonner, what we're doing is we are finally, I think, making headway in helping the science community understand that we are no longer in a stovepiped organization. We are really trying to fuse human exploration and science, because they're interdependent. What you said, I've heard the same story. I have been told that if we launched a Europa mission to Jupiter today with an Atlas V, and then we finished the development of SLS and launch in 2019 or 2017, I guess, it would catch up with and pass, the Europa vehicle that we launched today, and it's just physics. And if you can get something going really fast, really quick, once it's in space, it doesn't lose speed. And the heavy lift launch vehicle, particularly with its upper stage, with a J2X, we get things going really fast, really quick. And they will.
Is that on a Delta IV?
Oh, no. This is the combination SLS and.
This is the one that.
This is the real.
Right.
The real SLS and MPCV, and I'm going to have people come in. I'm going to have the experts come in and brief you all, because I'm giving you concepts, and I don't ever claim to give you real numbers. So mine is an anecdotal story about launching today and being caught, on the way to Jupiter. But I have heard that over and over and over again. So the other thing is, it is imperative it will revolutionize the way that we do interplanetary missions, to be quite honest.
Thank you.
What would be even better would be the type of propulsion that Mike Gazarek and the folk in the Space Technology Mission Directorate are trying to develop, which is game-changing propulsion that cuts the time of transit from here to Mars from 8 months to something less, because the limiting factor for us there is the ability of the human, the central nervous system, to sustain 8 months in a hostile radiation environment. And the reason we're confused is because we don't know what the effect will be. That's why the International Space Station is so critical. That's why commercial crew and cargo is so critical, because we lose one of those legs of the triangle and we can't finish the race.
We're going to go to Representative Serrano so he can get some questions before the.
And Frank has stepped out to go vote.
Vote, yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Administrator Bolden. Thank you for being here.
The chairman went over to vote. He comes back. I'm going to go. Okay. We're going to keep going.
Can I go vote?
Sure. But then you have to face the voters, and that's, you think this is tough.
I like this job.
This is easy. Mr. Administrator, throughout the years, last few years for certain, there were two questions I asked concerning the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico. One always was, you think there'll be someone from that community, our community, that will go up in space as an astronaut? And Joe Acaba did, and he's a superstar now, and no one remembers I asked that question a lot of times, so I'd like to take some credit for it. But anyway, I couldn't do what he did, and he's really done a wonderful job of going around talking to schools and other places, and it's wonderful. And I understand he's going up again. And the other one is the Arecibo Observatory, which for a while was in danger of being done away with, and yet there are people in the scientific community who continue to tell us that that's a very important place. And for the Commonwealth, for the island, it's not just the work that it does and the service that this observatory brings to our scientific research, but also the fact that it's an icon, if a thing can be an icon in the community. What's the future? What is happening, and what can we do? You know how I feel about it, but
So I will just have to kind of go by what I've heard from Dr. John Holdren, who's the president's science advisor and knows much more about Arecibo than I did. But we have been talking about Arecibo, the new telescope that will be in Chile, anything that helps us identify and track near-Earth objects, and that is a critical need for Arecibo to do that. If you take any telescope out of the mix, we'll still be able to do the kinds of things we're doing, but not as well, because we need lots of data, and we need lots of information on asteroids. So I think it is, the question was asked yesterday about its funding, because I think it receives a lot of funding from the National Science Foundation.
exactly.
And so Dr. Holdren I think he actually took an action to go get some information on that. But my understanding is that NSF intends to continue to fund it, but I can't answer that for NSF.
Right. I understand that, but you should know or remember that this committee has been strongly in the past under both party leaderships, have been very strong in supporting it. Quickly, the whole issue of STEM, the lack of engineers, if you will, it can't be that people are not capable of teaching it, so it may be that we don't have folks who are interested. And yet we live in a society where young people are involved in technology day and night. Is there a relationship between the society we have now and going into these fields? And if not, how can we resolve that?
I tell you, the person who could answer that question brilliantly is Joe Acaba. Joe Acaba is a school teacher. He was a middle school math teacher and selected to be an astronaut in a class that NASA made the conscious decision that we wanted to bring people who knew how to teach, who had an education background, into the astronaut corps, not as payload specialists, not as anything, but as full-term astronauts. And Joe is one of the incredible ones. And I think what we have to do, and I think he would tell you the same thing, or if you get a chance to see Sonny Williams, who will be here on the Hill tonight for a reception, I think they would tell you we have two challenges. We always talk about inspiration, but you can't inspire a young person if they don't know what's available. So we've got to inform them of what's available. People like Joe Acaba, Sonny Williams, Don Pettit, who is the modern-day Mr. Wizard. We have to continue to get them in front of school kids remotely most of the time, downlink from the International Space Station, visiting a school every once in a while when they can, to say, look, I'm no different than you. I started out just like you did.
Right.
You've got to study really hard and work hard, and you can do the same thing I've done.
Thank you. On a lighter note and in closing, one of the advantages of being bilingual, obviously, is that you see words you recognize. So when I saw Europa for the first time before I did my homework, I realized that that's Spanish for Europe, and I was wondering, what the heck were you making such a big fuss? Not today, but in the back, about going to Europe. I said, you can do that with no sweat. Then I did a little homework and realized that it may be the only moment where speaking Spanish created a little problem for me. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And the chairman's return. So I'm going to take a few minutes, and then I'm going to go vote. But let me, and I'm glad Mr. Culberson is still here, because he's my good friend. There's nobody more serious about this science business than him, and I'm a full supporter of his work on planetary science. But I do want to make sure that we just correct the record a little bit. He said that the administrator didn't mention this, the space launch system in the statement. It is in the first paragraph. I got to make sure that we get the record. Just, you know, I don't want him to think I'm picking on him in his absence. But this, all of the dollars that you are spending at NASA are, to some degree, very significantly micromanaged by the Congress. And
You said that's right.
I said that.
I
right.
agree.
And my friend in his statement said that he was working on some legislation to give you more flexibility. And then in between all that, he went back to saying, well, this is what we want you to do. And this is the problem here, and I want to make sure that we're straightforward.
Yes, sir.
And that we all understand each other, and that you are basically doing what the Congress has laid out. So in this this launch system deal, the Congress has even spelled out almost to the degree of how much cargo it's got to carry, and so on and so on. So this is not, this is policymakers in the Congress kind of laying on to NASA very specific requirements that then you have to figure out the science and the technical capability of carrying out things that may not, that in some cases might even work at cross purposes. Like get there as fast as you can, but carry all this stuff with you, or get there as fast as you can, but we want to send humans too. I mean, these things make it a little more challenging. And then to constrain the budget on top of that. But I think it's important to note that there was an agreement with the administration that said, okay, we're going to do this long-distance run to Mars. We're going to believe in the American private sector and believe that they can do something that the government's been doing for decades in terms of low Earth orbit. We're going to commercialize that, and we've seen the success of that. That's going to save money in the long term. And that this was part of a package of agreements that you have been carrying out, and really, it was probably more challenging to fly combat missions over enemy territory to deal with some of the challenges up in the Hill and the various committees that have jurisdiction, because we have funding jurisdiction, but there are committees that have authorizing jurisdictions. And then, of course, there's the Holy Grail. There's the U.S. Senate, which is just in charge, right? So these are issues that you have to manage. So I want to thank you for the work that you're doing. I wanted to set the record straight.
Yes, sir. I appreciate it.
And while I'm doing that, Mr. Schiff said that Chairman Wolf might be concerned if he was called chairman. I would be concerned if he was called chairman, since he'd have to get past my chair to get to the chairmanship. So thank you very much.
Sir, thank you very much for your very eloquent presentation of the facts.
Thank you, Mr. Yeah, I don't care who we call, but I understand from your point of view. The reason I left is so we can keep this going, and when we have the next one, I think we're going to end, because I don't want you to have to spend the whole day here. So I'm going to go through these relatively fast.
Yes, sir.
There is U.S. Use of Space Act agreements. There is a wealth of information available online and in other public sources about unclassified federal contracts, including who has received those contracts, their dollar values, and their purposes. As far as I know, there's no comparable source of public information about NASA's Space Act agreements. Why shouldn't this information be available to public scrutiny?
Mr. Chairman, are you asking why shouldn't Space Act agreement information on classified programs be available for public scrutiny?
No, the unclassified.
We are working, as a matter of fact, we're working to provide for the Congress and the American public it would be more like a spreadsheet that would list the Space Act agreements that we have in force. And I actually think
It was very tough for the committee to get this.
I think we provided that.
Yeah,
the
but
committee has-
I meant for the public, though. Why shouldn't it be available for public scrutiny? It's public money, and
Mr. Chairman, I will take it for action. I thought once we provided it to you, it was in the public domain. I think it's in the public domain anyway, and Mr. Chairman, let me go back and find out. I thought once we gave it to you, it's gone.
we didn't do that, and the authorizers
No, sir,
could
I
not
didn't
get
mean
it.
that, sir. I
Yeah.
meant, once we provide it to you, then it is no longer privileged information between the administration and the Congress, unless we put something on it that says sensitive, what's it, Diana? Sensitive but unclassified. If I put an SBU on it, it means that one of the companies has asked us not to divulge some technical information because it's proprietary, but we very seldom have that. I think I sent you something recently on the security issue, but usually when we send it over in a regular document, you can have it. And
Well,
you can
I
put
think
it
the
up- we'll put it
authorizers-
up on a website.
I think the authorizers had a problem. NASA's process for entering the Space Act agreements is extremely decentralized. The individual centers control much of the process and even have authority to enter into some agreements without headquarters notification or review. How do you ensure consistency in the application of standards and controls when the centers have so much autonomy? And shouldn't it be centralized? Shouldn't you have the final sign-off?
No, sir. I don't. I shouldn't. I am not if we want to get things done, the purpose of a Space Act agreement, as I understand it, as directed by the Congress, is to enhance the transfer of technology, enhance the NASA's ability to help grow the economy and make us stronger. If everything's got to come to headquarters, we're in trouble. We slow things down. We try not to. Major Space Act agreements that involve utilization of big facilities or something that may, that may have dual use for a national security need or something, I probably need to be involved. And but there are some things that the centers do where we have asked them to find ways to better, more efficiently utilize their facilities that we know we're going to need down the road, and we don't, there's no reason to access it, but we're not using it.
Okay.
An example would be the Johnson Space Center with the Neutral Buoyancy Lab, the NBL. We are still training astronauts to do spacewalks, but there's a lot of free time in there, and so they now work to enter into Space Act agreements with, and they're usually reimbursable, where the company, almost always reimbursable, where the company pays for the utilization of a facility.
Maybe they should all be made public then, because the
And
committee
that's
had a
what I
hard time.
thought, the
The committee had a hard time,
and
and the authorizers had a hard time.
As I said, I will get back to you, but
Okay.
we talked about what I think you're telling me. I agree with you that Space Act agreements should be available in the public domain somehow, whether it's online or something. And we actually talked about this the other day, because in the small business realm, anybody can go online, can go on the NASA website, go to the small business drop-down, and they can see every single small business contract that NASA has, whether it's at a center or anywhere, and when that's going to expire and what it is, so they can decide whether or not, they can plan ahead as to whether or not they want to bid on it. We won't have anything like that with the Space Act agreement, because Space Acts are generally unique to the person in NASA. But I'll get back to you, sir. I think we can do this easy.
My understanding is that Space Act agreements with foreign entities are reviewed by the State Department when those agreements are considered significant and are intended to be binding under international law. Does that mean that some foreign Space Act agreements, such as those, quote, not deemed significant, do not receive State Department review?
Sir, I will verify what I'm about to say. My understanding, since everything I do with an international is considered a treaty, something that I treat very seriously, and I include Space Act agreements, I think anything that we do with a foreign entity, any agreement that we make with them, goes through I can't remember what the number of the process is, but it goes through the State Department review process. We have an example of a Space Act agreement that's waiting to be signed now, and considered to be small and insignificant, but it went through State Department review.
Okay,
And frequently they go through the entire interagency process to make sure that you know, we're not stepping on DOD's toes or anything else.
If you
But
could
I
share
will
that
get
with the
back to you
committee.
on that.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Cost control. GAO recently found evidence of improvements in NASA's adherence to cost and schedule goals among all current projects other than James Webb. To what do you attribute this improvement, and do you believe it's sustainable?
Mr. Chairman, I disagree with that statement. That statement is not accurate in its entirety. The James Webb Space Telescope for the last 2 years has been under control both in schedule and cost. In fact, they're a little bit ahead in schedule, and I'm not certain what is meant by other than the James Webb Space Telescope. We have instituted processes like joint confidence level.
Well, it was actually a congratulatory, complimentary question.
I know it's intended to be, sir, but I just, they make a, it's not a.
I know GAO is looking at the, but go ahead.
Yes, sir.
Go ahead.
It is not a complimentary comment about the James Webb Space Telescope. That is a very, very complex project that is, I mean, it's going to revolutionize everything.
I understand. That's why we as a
We
committee
all worked
support it,
very
yeah.
hard, and I promised you and Senator Mikulski that we were going to get that program in order. It has new management. Northrop Grumman put new management in place. We submitted a revised cost and schedule profile, and we're living up to that. So when somebody says other than James Webb, I just have to say, what do you mean it's not living up to what it was supposed to do?
Well, I'll give you the telephone number. of the
Yes, sir.
people that wrote the question,
I got
and
it.
we can
I got
talk.
it. Yes, sir.
Last year, NASA requested a significant budget increase for the James Webb program, despite the fact that it is literally billions of dollars over budget, and that may be the reason. At the same time, NASA canceled the GEMS astrophysics project because it was at risk of going over budget by 45 or $50 million. I think this highlights a significant difference in the way that large and small projects are treated by NASA, with the larger, riskier, more expensive projects being given more flexibility on cost, schedule issues than smaller. Do you agree?
I understand the question now, and it's sort of like, is James Webb too big to fail? And that's not the case. I made a promise to this Congress, both House and Senate, that we would keep James Webb on cost and on schedule, and if it violated that, there is a limit beyond which it will not go.
But we really
It's
can
not
cancel
doing that.
James Webb. I mean, it would be tough to cancel James Webb now. It would be.
For me, if something went wrong with James Webb that caused it right now to have a dramatic change in its cost or schedule, meeting its cost or schedule, that means we have met a significant technical challenge that we didn't anticipate. So it may be something that evaluation says we cannot possibly overcome. So nothing's too big to fail. I would not waste the taxpayers' money if I found out that there was something unknown, and I can't even, and this is like the 1,000-year asteroid hitting Earth that I tell you don't worry about. If we reach a point where James Webb begins to overrun again and it gets significantly over or it gets significantly delayed, it means we have met a technical challenge that we did not anticipate, and that would be something that we would have to evaluate and say, is this worth trying to salvage this? I don't anticipate that. I don't want to panic anybody. I don't anticipate that
The
happening.
press is, they're all writing back.
Yes,
there.
sir. Well, they need to understand what I'm saying. I know they like to write that stuff, but I'm not talking doom and gloom. I'm saying James Webb is an incredible story. I have 2 years now of data that says the program has been on cost and on schedule, and we're buying down margin all the time. So if something changes, it means we've had something happen that we really didn't anticipate.
Okay.
And that's always possible in a development program.
Sure, I understand.
GEMS, the other example, GEMS was a cost. It had a very defined cost ceiling. It's a small project, and so that's not. I don't put that in the same category as the James Webb Space Telescope. GEMS was not something that was going to have a dramatic impact on humanity. It was a very good project, but technically it had some challenges that we just figured it cannot overcome those technical challenges within the funding guidelines that we agreed. And so that, for me, was a relatively, I didn't make the call, but it was a good call, and I thought it was a pretty easy call.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fiscal year 2013 funding implementation. In discussions following the submission of the Sequestration Transparency Act, NASA told us that it would apply sequestration equally to each appropriated amount, but not necessarily to each program and project contained within those amounts. That approach looks inconsistent, however, with a statutory requirement to apply sequestration to each program, project, and activity. How does your sequestration implementation plan address the statutory requirement?
I think we're in compliance with the statutory requirement to apply the 5% cut across the board in each directorate or program. I think I'm not going to guess what they're talking about. But I think we are complying with the statutory requirement in terms of with reference to sequestration. If I can get an example.
Yeah, basically the next question, it's that you could be using this to go after, and let me ask you the question, some congressional priorities that we were talking about earlier. So can Congress and the administration have different views about the appropriate funding levels for several major NASA programs? And as you know, I was out of the room voting, but including planetary science, Orion, SLS. Yeah. Can you assure the committee that the administration will not use sequestration as an opportunity to implement selected cuts to congressional priorities? How will you incorporate congressional input into your decision-making about where and when to reallocate funds as a result of sequestration? So that's
Yes, sir. And because maybe I'm naive, I don't view anything as a congressional priority or an administration priority. When the Authorization Act was signed by the President in 2010, that established what I mentioned were three big priorities. That it's actually more than three, but I lump the International Space Station, commercial crew and cargo, and technology transfer to technology development together. So I think in at that particular time, we agreed that those five things were priorities for the agency. And what we have done is we've tried to wall them off such that whenever a cut had to come, whenever the administration asked me for a 5% cut or a 2% cut, I don't go and look at SLS or MPCV or commercial crew or the International Space Station. It has to come from somewhere else. Now, purist people in the science community will say, yeah, but you're putting programs in jeopardy because you won't take a cut from James Webb. Well, James Webb is a joint priority it is a national priority established by the 2010 Authorization Act. So they're absolutely right. I am not going to go in and take money from James Webb to make something else whole because I promised the President and the Congress made an agreement that we would not do that. And so we're not doing that. Yes, sir.
Weather satellites. Although NOAA is responsible for the procurement and operation of the nation's civil weather satellites, they pay NASA on a reimbursable basis to manage the design and development of these satellites through a joint agency satellite division. Do you believe this basic division of funding and responsibility between the two agencies is successful? And as you know, the Senate had language in that they pretty much, took from and...
I understand. And the answer to the question, I think it is highly successful. As demonstrated by almost everything that we have managed for NOAA, whether it's GOES or whether it's NPP or JPSS, we're always challenged financially. I think the arrangement that we have with NOAA, and I'll take this opportunity to compliment the former NOAA administrator, Dr. Jane Lipchenko. She was awesome to work with because she's now gone back to academia, but it was great to have a fellow administrator pick up the phone and say, hey, there's some confusion. We're not in sync. And we still are able to do that because we attend each other's programmatic reviews. In the case of a lot of the weather satellites, the JPSS program, we sometimes co-chair each other's reviews so that we make sure that we stay in sync.
Now there's no one home at Commerce. They have no secretary. The acting secretary is leaving. They have no Census Bureau. They have no PTO. They have no NOAA. I mean, they have really. It's like the boy in the movie Home Alone. Remember that movie?
Yes, sir. I do.
There's no one over there.
Home Alone 2 also.
Home Alone. I didn't see that one.
I really liked it. It was good.
I didn't see.
I forget which one's Christmas.
Yeah, I think
one
was Christmas.
Yes, sir.
Okay, because do you want to comment? I'm not
About the Senate's?
About the Senate language. Did you like that or dislike that?
As I haven't had a chance to sit down face to face with Senator Mikulski, but if the Senate decides and you all agree that we should take weather satellites, we will do that and we'll do a great job. The point that everyone should understand is the coordination that goes on right now in terms of getting that satellite or that system turned over to NOAA for the operational phase will not change. They are the weather people and the weather service, and they do an incredible job.
But would there be savings because in essence, one becomes a little bit of a middleman. Would there be savings?
Congressman, we'd have to go back and, if that were the direction of the Congress, that NASA take acquisition of weather satellites from NOAA, and we take it all the way through development and delivery, we would do that. I'm not, I'm a middle of the road guy. I do what you all tell me to do. But I would make it very clear to people that I think it would be a mistake for NASA to try to take on the job of becoming the weather service. We don't do that. We could learn, but we don't do that. My concern about any movement of responsibility from one agency to the other is who defines the requirements for the new system. If NOAA is defining the requirements and I'm responsible for developing it, we're probably going to have a problem. So I would like to have very clear lines of distinction. If a decision is made to change the way we do business today, it would just require us to get together with NOAA and all of you in the Congress and at least understand how you want us to implement this change. We can make anything happen. Okay. I'm not lobbying for anything. Diana, why? See, she's
excess property. 2 weeks ago, NASA released a notice of intent to have an external party lease renovate and reuse Hangar 1 and potentially the rest of Moffett Airfield at the Ames Research Center. It's become a little controversial here. Both of these properties have previously been identified as having no current or future NASA purpose. So why is it acceptable to lease them instead of reporting them as excess?
Mr. Chairman, what I did was after years of deliberation and trying to reach an agreement, I asked the GSA, the government's landlord, if they would come in and take over the evaluation of this process for us and run it. And I was advised by GSA that the most expeditious way to get NASA out of the business of running an airfield and paying all of its cost is to let them go out and see if there is a private entity or another government entity that would be willing to take that responsibility off our hands. It is a multi-year process to access something, and so I did not want to have to wait for that multi-year process and continue to pay for something that I'm not using right now. So GSA recommended that we go through what is called the notice of intent to let everybody in the communities know what it is we want to do. That we want to open the book and say, anybody who wants to use this facility and for something that we can relate to stuff that NASA does, and in the process wants to reside the hangar because it is such a historical landmark to the community out there, we'll offer it. And then we'll come out, I will go out and meet with the community, tell them how we intend to affect this process, and tell them that as a taxpayer, they're going to actually benefit because NASA will no longer be paying for the operation of the airfield or for the maintenance of the hangar or other things. So that's the way that I was able to do that.
There was some controversy. I gave the IG a letter with regard to that, and I don't know if he shared it with you.
Mr. Chairman, as you know, if you're talking about land and facilities, there is always controversy. I am almost there. I'm glad that Mr. Culberson came back. I am oh so close to having the ArcJet facility from the Johnson Space Center delivered to the Ames Research Center because that's where it should be as we look for more efficient, effective ways to do our job. And Mr. I just wanted to make sure that he was here when I said that in case he wants to shoot me.
Make sure the spies are not involved out there, though, with it.
Yes, I got you.
There are some questions on the Space Launch System and Orion, I think you've covered it. We will submit them for the record.
Yes, sir.
To get you. And I'm going to just good. I'm going to come back to you if you have more. Commercial crew. NASA's current round of commercial crew development is being executed via Space Act agreements with a base period lasting through the middle of next fiscal year, and optional milestones leading all the way to a crewed flight demonstration. Is it still NASA's intention to award FAR-based contracts for development and certification work beyond the base period?
Yes, sir, it is. And in fact, we have actually already entered the FAR process for, we have a contract, and it just so happens, we were very lucky that the three companies that are the Space Act agreement companies in developing the capability to take crews to orbit are the three companies that also now are bidding for the contract to put together a plan that will show us how they intend to meet our requirements, that will give us all of their hazard reports, and so each of them is now working under contract to do that. That buys down the risk that we, because I extended the period of utilization of Space Act agreements. This is not what we were supposed to originally do. You were very gracious, and the committee was very gracious in allowing us to keep three competitors when you really wanted to go down to one, so I'm appreciative of that. But we have to have a competition where we go down to 1.5 or 2 or whatever.
When do you see it going to 2?
When do I see us going to 2? We intend to put a request for proposal on the street this summer, and you will probably get a selection, a down select, and that will either be to 2 or to 1 or to 1.5. It is budget dependent.
By the end of this year, then?
You won't see the selection announced before the middle of next year, 2014. That's what we said. That's when we get to phase 2. And I'll go back and double check, but I think that's right. I didn't see Diana frown, so I think that's right.
In previous conversation about the program's out-year funding needs, and you referenced it earlier, NASA has indicated that an appropriation of more than $800 million annually will be necessary. Given the overarching funding constraints that the Congress is likely to be operating under, and the need to make continued investments in other high-priority programs like James Webb, Orion, SOS, it seems improbable that the program's budget can be increased. Can the program achieve its goals with an annual funding rate closer to the currently authorized level?
Mr. Chairman, it can achieve part of its goals. Its goal to facilitate the success of a commercial space capability to get astronauts to the International Space Station can be achieved if that's what the Congress decides to do. The goal of flying in 2017 cannot be met at a funding level of $500 million. And that is consistent with what we've said since I've been the NASA administrator. It's really hard to go from an estimate of $1 billion a year for developing a program down to 300, then 400, and then up to 500. And we have managed to hold the line on 2017, but if we aren't able to get up to the $800 million level, then I will have to come back and officially notify the Congress that we cannot make 2017 for availability of commercial crew. And that puts the triangle in jeopardy.
Yeah. Okay. Let me go to Mr. Culberson. Right.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On the thank you for bringing up the ArcJet. That's of course a real concern in Houston. The ArcJet facility at Johnson was supported by the fees paid by the users, and they had reimbursement contracts. So the cost was near zero, obviously, and they had NASA personnel working on it. But the facility—
That's not zero, sir.
It's a lot less expensive than the Ames facility, which I understood was funded. NASA funded up to 45% of the cost of that facility. You've already moved the ArcJet components?
We are trying to finalize the arrangements for the transfer of the ArcJet facility. We are still negotiating. We're still trying to reach consensus, I guess is the right word, with the Congress, that every time we get another question that says don't do anything until we get this question answered, that is the right thing to do, and it is something I intend to do. And if it's the last thing I do as the NASA administrator, which it may be, we cannot continue to have duplicate facilities. I fully understand what the people at Johnson Space Center say. They like doing that. They're really good at it. We don't need 2 ArcJet facilities.
Right, but that one was supported by fees paid by the users.
Congressman, I can get back to you a comparative cost for maintaining 2 ArcJet facilities, even when one, and then show you what it would cost to have it out at Ames, 1 facility.
Okay.
And I think you'll find that there is a savings.
Okay,
it's just,
I would be interested in seeing it.
The folk at Johnson Space Center, we have other programs and projects for which we need the bodies. And if the body is maintaining an ArcJet facility that I could, transfer out to the Ames Research Center and get it done, then there are more things that we can do at Johnson that they would really like to do.
And obviously, all of us in the committee support you making best use of our taxpayers' hard-earned dollars.
Yes, sir.
And I look forward to seeing the analysis.
We'll get
It's
there.
hard not to be a little skeptical as a Texan when the Obama administration, I know that wasn't necessarily you, but the Obama administration would not send one of the space shuttles to Houston, Texas, the Johnson Space Center, the home of the manned space program, and sends it instead to New York City or California. I mean, that's deeply offensive. And there's a pattern of behavior. It's not you, sir. I'm not picking on you
It's me.
necessarily.
No, so.
But let me tell you, there's a pattern with the Obama administration. We vote wrong, and all sorts of things get moved out of Texas.
I am a person, I think the chairman will tell you, I want to make sure that everybody understands who's responsible for what. The president didn't have a clue where shuttles were going until I delivered the word that I'm going to have a press conference and we're going to announce this. He did not intervene in that. That was my decision. I'm criticized for it, and I appreciate that. I am a Houstonian by adoption.
Sure.
And we had a process, and in that process, the city of Houston did not come out 1, 2, or 3. And we can review that with you again. I would like to put that to bed. To be
Sure, I do
honest.
too, and I know, and the chairman knows this from my history. I really do my best not to be parochial or, because the space program is a strategic asset to the entire country. And I've also always done my best not to look at it as a jobs program because it's for the good of the entire nation. And I've always felt and have told all my friends in the space program in Houston that it's always better if we don't think of the space program as a jobs program. Look at it from the perspective of the country as a strategic asset, as a way to protect the high ground, as a way to preserve our innovation, our ability as a nation to innovate and pursue scientific excellence and lift up the human heart. All those things are vitally important. And, oh, by the way, it's a great jobs program. I'm with you. But let me tell you, it is a sensitive subject in Texas. It does cause a lot of hurt. And then when something like the ArcJet gets moved out, it just adds to it.
Congressman, one thing I would say is there is no threat to the Johnson Space Center by seeking efficiencies. As you said, JSC is the home of human spaceflight. And mission control is there. That's not going to change, at least not in the foreseeable future. I mean, if the Congress, if you mandated that I have to reduce centers, you told me that you were going to institute a NASA BRAC, then everything's on the
Sure.
table. But we're not doing that right now.
Talk to us a little bit about, if I could, the effect of, because we are in a really tough budget environment. Looking out forward, you're going to obviously have the support of this committee and the Senate committee. Chairman Wolf has been just there's no one fought harder to protect NASA or the sciences than the chairman, and Senator Mikulski has been terrific. In a flat funding environment for the future, because we didn't really get a chance to tie this up on the heavy lift launch rocket system and Orion, what does that flat funding profile for the future mean for the NASA's ability to get a heavy lift rocket and the Orion capsule operational?
As I mentioned before, for the foreseeable future, unless sequestration goes for 10 years, we have planned the priority programs, the SLS, MPCV, International Space Station, Commercial Crew, and Technology Development, along with the James Webb Space Telescope, to fit a flat funding profile. What I would love to be allowed to do inside that flat funding profile is give the teams the opportunity to move funds around as they need to keep the phasing of availability of things going. An example would be, because we are under a flat funding profile, and there was more money than we needed for the development of MPCV, MPCV will probably be ready before it's ready to fly, because we had to spend money when we had it, and it's a little bit ahead, even in spite of the fact that we had a crack, and we had to deal with that. But there is a launch schedule, a launch availability due to everybody else using Cape Canaveral, and we're using a Delta IV. And so the availability of the launch vehicle and the pad, if we had had flexibility, we could have shifted the funding from MPCV maybe to construction of the B-2 test stand to facilitate the SLS staying on schedule. That's all I'm talking about when I talk about funding flexibility inside the programs. We're not talking about taking money from a program. In the end, you know, the calculus is, in the end, the area under the curve will be the same. We will spend the same amount of money on SLS, the same amount of money on MPCV. It's just that we are phasing it such that we deliver things when they're needed, not when the money is available. That's not an efficient way to do things.
So you anticipate that the heavy lift launch rocket will be available you'll do your first test flight and then have it available to launch operational when?
It will be available for the first flight in 2017.
Test.
For its first test.
Right.
And that was a technical constraint. That you could have given me tons of money. I just don't think we could have accelerated that 2017 date. Its next, you know, the human flight will be 2021 or so. That's something that, you know, if we're allowed to be flexible, we might be able to do something. I don't know.
Well, it's a spectacular vehicle for the Europa
It is.
mission, and I'm going to
We
give you
talked about
this.
that
I'm going to
earlier.
give you this for the record. This is why Europa is so important. In one graphic, it's got 40% more water than the Earth.
Yes, sir.
Heat. It's probably salt water, and it's been oxygenated for billions of years. Almost certainly that's where we're going to discover life. That's why it's been such a top priority of the
Yes, sir.
Cadle survey. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you,
you.
Administrator Bolden.
We're going to kind of end because I think we're coming up to another vote. Just to wrap up, one, the letter last year said you went for Chinese nationals from, it was June of 2012. In less than a year, you went from 156 to 192. If you would furnish the committee what centers they are in.
Yes, sir. We'll do that. And in fact, I will do that, sir. I think in the packet that we delivered, we break it down by center, but I will go back and verify that.
Okay.
And we just delivered that last night.
Okay. Secondly, and I want to make this very clear, part of your problem at NASA, I believe, was the IG's office. And if the IG can't do a better job, NASA ought to get a different IG. This is a real test for, I understand, but this is a real test because the IG sort of blew these things off because we've been talking, the Ames case, the IG gets an F. He's failed. And in NASA Langley, he gets an F. He's failed. And so, because we talked to career people, they went into the IG. So this is a test, and you might tell the IG this, or he'll probably hear it. This, if this doesn't work out, this is really a failure of the Inspector General to do his job, or the Inspector General staff to do their job. And some of the comments that we've had when they come into the IG, and it is reflected upon you, and in some respects, the IG. So so this is a test, and if the test is not, we're going to ask for a new IG there, because we're going to make sure that. Thirdly, what I would like to do, Mr. Administrator, because you have heard me talk about China. In China today, there are roughly 25. The number flexes up and down. Catholic bishops that are under house arrest. Congressman Chris Smith took Holy Communion from Bishop Sue. Chris led the delegation in Rome for the new Pope, St. Francis. And that bishop who gave Holy Communion to Chris Smith has never been seen since, been taken away. The Bishop of Hong Kong was by to see me, telling me the persecution of the Catholic Church. After the Pope was appointed, the Chinese government just literally said pretty tough things with regard to the Catholic Church within the last two weeks. Secondly, there are several hundred Protestant pastors that are in jail, house church people that are in jail. More Chinese people come through my office than probably any other office up here on Capitol Hill. All of the dissidents, the Chinese people are wonderful people. The blind activist, Chen, who is up at NYU, was by to see me a week and a half ago. We're having a hearing with Chen in 2 to 2.5 weeks. All of the dissidents come through my office. They're wonderful people. They want freedom. There have been 101 Tibetan monks that have set themselves afire, who have poured kerosene and gasoline on them, have set themselves afire, and have died by the hands of the Chinese government. We know what they're doing in spying. They run the program whereby they're selling organs, kidneys, and for well over $50,000 to people that come from the West. I was in Beijing prison #1, where they were making Tiananmen Square demonstrators. You remember Tiananmen Square? It was the People's Liberation Army that opened fire and killed the same people that run the space program, fired on the crowd and killed all the people in Tiananmen. When I was in Beijing prison #1, we saw Tiananmen Square demonstrators who were making socks for export to the West. They were still in prison in the late 90s. Just so you have a better understanding, I'd like to, for some time, when the blind activist Chen comes into town, when Bob Fu, the leading dissident, when somebody from the Cardinal Kung Foundation in the Catholic Church, somebody who works for the Dalai Lama, and to really come over and take a half an hour and sit down with you so that you understand. We did this with Secretary Guterres in the previous administration. So can I get agreement that you'll sit down with these people so they can understand?
Mr. Chairman, I would be glad to sit down with them. I would only ask one thing, and that is that I be allowed to ask them.
You can ask them any question you want.
If what they feel our inability to help.
You can ask
with
anything.
their space program.
You can ask them anything. Well,
I mean, that would be fair.
Yeah. Keep in
And
mind,
I would be
I
more than
guarantee
happy.
you.
Yes, sir.
And I'll come over with them.
Yes, sir. And you and I have a healthy.
Yeah.
We respectfully disagree on this, and I think that's good. I applaud you for your devotion to human rights, and I equally agree. Like we said, I grew up saying you keep your friends close and your enemies closer. So,
but not to have 192 so close that they can spy and Bojang can take it away. So
yes, sir.
I mean, I left that subject, but I can't. I mean,
yes,
so
sir.
Anyway, so okay, I will arrange for them to come over and see you. Then the last question was, with the budgetary, then if we're having this budgetary problems of the figures on commercial 800, why have two rather than one?
Mr. Chairman, that was what I meant when I said when we get to the down select, I think it would be unfortunate if we ended up with one, because then we're in the situation that if that one goes, we're back to the Russians again. But if the budget only supports one when we go into the competition phase, that's what we're going to go with. I do not, I would not like to extend the period of Space Act agreements again. That's the one thing that
But the numbers in the House bill were higher than the Senate bill.
Yes, sir.
And so I think you have to factor that in as you come to that. And so
And, sir, I did not say we could not accomplish the goal of commercial spaceflight. I said that the goal of flying in 2017 cannot be met at a level of 520.
No, I understand. No, you were very clear. And then I'm going to go to Mr. Culbertson for a second. The last thing is if you could get back on that, and I do appreciate your accepting those other things at the outset, and if you could let us know when you make the decision on that, I would appreciate it. With that, I'll go to Mr. Culbertson.
I just want to very briefly, Mr. Chairman and Administrator Bolden, because other committee members had conflicts and couldn't be here, but Chairman Wolf has the united support of the entire subcommittee and, frankly, the Congress in the language that he's included in the bill on China in his work to prevent the NASA from cooperating with the Chinese Space Agency. Everyone in Congress, Frank Wolf was a pioneer in opening the eyes of the Congress and the country to the espionage that China has been engaged in for so many years. He was the first one out of the gate to talk about this. He opened my eyes to it, and I can guarantee the House of Representatives supports this good man and his work, and I just want to be certain that you and everyone at NASA understands how deadly serious this problem is, and how important it is that it's not just Frank Wolf; it's the entire Congress, and this subcommittee is behind him. He speaks for all of us, and we're going to back him up 110% on making sure that the Chinese do not penetrate our space program. There's this theft. This Inspector General should know, and I hope he's listening, that we stand behind our chairman on this effort and making sure that there's aggressive investigation and prosecution of not only the Chinese agents that are involved, but anyone at NASA that has helped them penetrate and been able to steal this technology. And please stop trying to find ways, please, not just you, but the entire agency, stop trying to find ways around the language that's federal law that Chairman Wolf put in. You can't just look. It doesn't just limit this to bilateral. I mean, you can't, it's not, I heard you say earlier that you felt like NASA's in full compliance with this law, and that maybe multilateral agreements might be okay. That's not the way the law reads. You want to read the law in its entirety, and clearly the purpose of the law is to prevent the Chinese from getting access to our space program because it's run by the People's Liberation Army.
Congressman,
so I just want to reiterate, we're behind this good man.
I understand that
110%.
And as I've said before, I don't think no one was as concerned as I was when we had the alleged breaches of security anywhere in NASA, and I intend to make sure that it doesn't happen. But I would be derelict in my duty if I did not give you my position, and that is that, I think we can work with countries and keep them from stealing our technology or doing whatever it is. We work with the Russians today. We're not perfect, but we do a pretty good job.
Yes, sir, but this is an absolute prohibition.
Congressman, I said I agree 100%. I think we are complying, and if we're not, then it is my intent to make sure that our staffs get together again, because you said just now, there is obviously something that I am not understanding correctly. I did not think the prohibition inhibited or prohibited participation in multilateral activities. For example, going to a forum where there are multiple countries present there. I know I cannot enter into any agreement with the Chinese.
Or hire contractors that employ Chinese and bring them in and put them over an F-24.
We are not doing that. And if we find that we are doing that, then that's why the investigation is underway right now.
Well, Chairman Wolf speaks for all of us on this.
I understand it. Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Here is adjourned.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you.